Ethan had never imagined the word home could feel so temporary. When his mother remarried, he told himself it was just another change he'd have to survive. Michael Carter seemed kind enough, soft-spoken, reliable, the kind of man who fixed things quietly and never raised his voice. He was everything Ethan's real father wasn't, and that alone made it hard to know how to feel about him. At first, Ethan kept his distance. He stayed out late after classes, ate dinner in his room, and told himself it was easier not to get attached. But the house had its own rhythm, and over time, Michael's presence became part of the background. The sound of boots at the door, the smell of coffee early in the morning, the faint hum of a radio from the garage. Then one night in early spring, everything felt different. The sky was restless, filled with low thunder and silver streaks of lightning. The power had already flickered twice before the lights went out completely. Ethan sat on his bed, the glow of his phone the only thing separating him from the dark. His mother was out of town on a last-minute work trip, and for the first time, it was just the two of them in the house. He heard Michael moving in the hallway, slow, careful steps, like he didn't want to startle anyone. A moment later, there was a soft knock on Ethan's door. "Ethan, you awake?" His voice was steady, but quiet, as if testing the space between them. "Yeah," Ethan answered after a pause. Michael opened the door halfway. The faint light from the storm illuminated one side of his face, the rest hidden in shadow. "It's freezing in the other room," he said. "Mind if I crash in here for a while?" "Just till the power comes back." Ethan hesitated. He wasn't sure what the right answer was, but the way Michael spoke, gentle, almost embarrassed, made it impossible to refuse. "Yeah, sure. It's fine," he said. Michael walked in, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed. He stayed on top of the blanket, leaving space between them. Outside, the rain drummed against the glass like a slow heartbeat. Neither of them spoke for a while. Ethan stared at the ceiling, pretending to scroll through his phone, even though he'd lost the signal. He could feel Michael's presence beside him, not close, but there, solid, quiet, safe in a way he didn't want to admit. "You okay?" Michael asked eventually. "Yeah, just not used to how dark it gets out here when the power's gone." Michael chuckled softly. "Yeah, country nights have a way of swallowing everything." The sound of his voice eased something in Ethan's chest. He hadn't realized how long it had been since someone had talked to him without trying to fix him or judge him. Michael wasn't like that. He listened. A long silence followed before Michael spoke again, more thoughtful this time. "You remind me a little of myself when I was younger." Ethan turned his head toward him. "Yeah, how's that?" "I kept a lot in," Michael said. "Tried to look okay even when I wasn't. Thought that made me stronger. But it just made me lonely." Ethan felt something twist inside him. The words were too familiar. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I get that." For a while, the storm filled the room between them, the soft rattle of rain, the low hum of thunder in the distance. Then Michael shifted, lying back with his hands folded behind his head. The bed dipped slightly, and for some reason, that small movement made Ethan's heartbeat quicken. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was recognition, the kind that happens when someone sees the version of you that even you've forgotten. "You don't have to talk," Michael murmured, eyes half closed. "Just rest. Sometimes that's enough." Ethan nodded, though Michael couldn't see it. He lay back too, staring at the dark outline of the ceiling. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel so empty. He could hear the steady rhythm of Michael's breathing beside him, the quiet reassurance of another person who understood what silence really meant. When he finally drifted to sleep, the storm had passed. The next morning, sunlight crept across the sheets. Michael was gone. The other side of the bed was cold, but the faint impression of where he had been still lingered. A quiet, undeniable trace of something that neither of them would mention, but both would remember. Ethan sat up slowly, looking at the spot beside him. He couldn't name what he felt, comfort, confusion, maybe guilt, but he knew the line between them had shifted. Not crossed, not broken, just moved. And deep down, he wasn't sure whether that frightened him or made him feel less alone. The week after that storm, Ethan tried not to think about it. He told himself it hadn't meant anything. that Michael had only stayed because of the weather, nothing more. But memory has a way of replaying what we least want to remember. Every time Ethan passed him in the hallway or heard his voice downstairs, the air felt charged, fragile, like glass that could crack under the smallest pressure. Michael didn't act differently. He was the same, steady, patient, the man who fixed the porch light before Laura got home and brewed an extra pot of coffee in the morning. But there was something new in the pauses between words, in the looks that lasted a second too long. When their eyes met, both of them seemed to flinch, as if they'd stumbled onto a secret they didn't choose to share. One evening, Ethan came home from class and found Michael sitting alone on the porch. The sun was setting, turning the fields into strips of orange and gold. A half-empty glass of iced tea sat beside him. "Hey," Michael said without looking up. "Rough day." Ethan dropped his backpack and sat on the step below him. "Just long. My professor wouldn't stop talking." Michael smiled faintly. "Yeah, some people mistake talking for teaching." They both laughed softly, the tension breaking for a moment. It was strange how easy it felt with him sometimes. Easier than it ever was with his mother, who always seemed busy, distracted, half listening. Michael leaned back in his chair, eyes following the clouds. "Laura said she might have to stay another week out of town." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, she texted me earlier. Said not to wait up for her." There was a pause. Then Michael said quietly, "Guess it's just us again." Ethan didn't answer. The sentence sounded harmless, but it carried a weight neither wanted to name. He watched the sunlight fade, feeling both comforted and exposed. Inside the house, things settled into an easy routine. They cooked dinner together sometimes, watched quiet movies that didn't require much conversation, and shared leftover pizza in the kitchen at midnight. There was nothing inappropriate about any of it. But the way Ethan's chest tightened when Michael laughed, or how Michael's gaze softened when Ethan spoke, made it clear that something had changed. It was a Wednesday night when it all felt too heavy to ignore. Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the last few days in his head, the quiet dinners, the shared jokes, the easy warmth. It wasn't wrong, he told himself, but it wasn't right either. He tossed in bed until the clock glowed past midnight. He got up, went downstairs for water, and found Michael still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He looked up when Ethan entered. "Couldn't sleep either?" Ethan shook his head. "No, you?" "Deadlines," Michael said, closing the laptop. "And maybe too much thinking." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, that too." For a while they said nothing, just the hum of the fridge and the distant sound of crickets outside. Then Michael spoke, voice low, careful. "You know, when I married your mom, I thought I could fix things. For her, for you, but maybe I was just trying to fix myself." Ethan's heart stumbled. "You don't need to fix anything. You're good, Michael. You're the only one who actually listens." Michael's eyes met his. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The silence felt too alive. Then Michael exhaled, his expression breaking into something between gratitude and regret. "Be careful saying things like that, Ethan." "Why?" Ethan asked, even though he already knew. Michael didn't answer right away. He stood, walked past him to rinse his glass, and said softly, "Because they start to mean too much." Ethan stood there, unable to speak. The sound of running water filled the gap between them. It wasn't what Michael said. It was how he said it. Honest, hurting, like he'd already crossed a line in his heart and wished he could step back. Later that night, Ethan lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear Michael's voice in his head. "They start to mean too much." He knew what it meant. Emotional infidelity wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, hidden in the space between what's said and what isn't. When morning came, he avoided Michael. They both pretended nothing had changed, but every glance felt like confession. When Laura called that evening, Ethan listened from the hallway as Michael spoke to her with a tone too careful, too practiced. After he hung up, Michael caught Ethan's eyes across the room. Neither of them said a word, but everything they didn't say filled the silence, longing, guilt, and the knowledge that what connected them couldn't ever be named. The days that followed blurred together. The air in the house seemed heavier, as if the walls themselves carried a secret neither of them wanted to keep. Ethan avoided the kitchen in the mornings, waiting until he heard the front door close before he went downstairs. Michael left earlier than usual, returning late and quiet, his expression unreadable. Even Laura's return a week later didn't lift the tension. It only buried it deeper beneath polite smiles and careful conversation. At dinner that first night, Laura talked about her trip, deadlines, hotel breakfasts, a new client who couldn't stop emailing. Ethan nodded at all the right moments, while Michael passed the salad and poured the wine, every movement rehearsed. No one mentioned the silence that had filled the house before she came back. It was easier to pretend it hadn't existed, but pretending doesn't last long. A few evenings later, Ethan found Michael in the garage, sorting through boxes of old tools. He looked tired, older than usual. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "Need a hand?" Michael didn't look up. "No, I've got it." Ethan hesitated by the door. "You've been avoiding me." That made Michael pause. He set down the wrench and finally met Ethan's eyes. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm just trying to be careful." "Careful about what?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. Michael wiped his hands on a rag, searching for words. "About crossing lines we can't uncross. You're a good kid, Ethan. I care about you, maybe more than I should. That's why I need to pull back." The honesty hit harder than any accusation could have. Ethan's throat tightened. "So we just act like nothing ever happened?" Michael gave a small, pained smile. "Nothing did happen. That's the point. We stop it before it turns into something that hurts people who don't deserve it." Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth in Michael's voice left no room. The silence that followed felt final, like a door quietly closing. That night, Ethan sat in his room long after midnight, staring at the faint reflection in his window. He realized that what hurt most wasn't losing Michael's attention. It was losing the version of himself he'd found in it. For the first time, someone had seen him clearly, and now that mirror was gone. He wondered if Michael felt the same sense of absence, or if he'd already learned how to live without it. Weeks turned into months. Laura's laughter filled the kitchen again, and the house found its rhythm. Ethan finished his semester, started working weekends at a small bookstore in town, and tried to convince himself that normalcy was enough. Sometimes he caught Michael watching him from across the table, not with longing but with something gentler. Pride, maybe, or relief. They both understood the distance was necessary, even if it ached. One quiet Sunday morning, Laura left early for a yoga retreat. The house was still half asleep when Ethan walked into the kitchen. Michael was there making coffee. The smell reminded Ethan of that night months ago. The storm, the silence, the strange comfort. "Morning," Michael said. His voice was light, easy. "Coffee?" "Sure." Ethan took the mug, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact was nothing, yet everything. They sat across from each other, the sound of the coffee maker filling the space where 1,000 unsaid things lived. Finally, Michael spoke. "You doing okay?" Ethan nodded. "Better than I was." "That's good." Michael smiled, the kind of smile that carried a quiet apology. "You're figuring yourself out. That's what matters." Ethan looked down at the mug, tracing the rim with his thumb. "Sometimes I miss how easy it felt to talk to you." Michael's smile faded, but his tone stayed calm. "We can still talk. We just have to do it the right way." Ethan met his eyes. "You mean without getting lost in it?" "Exactly," Michael said. "Without losing who we are." The conversation ended there, but the understanding between them lingered. Cleaner now, sharper, no longer hidden behind guilt. Ethan realized that endings didn't always have to come with anger or confession. Sometimes they came quietly when two people decided not to ruin what was left of the good. Later that afternoon, Ethan stood on the porch as Michael fixed a loose shutter. The sunlight caught the edges of his hair, and for a brief moment, everything looked still, safe, ordinary. Ethan felt a strange gratitude for the storm that had brought them too close, for the silence that had forced them apart, for the lesson that love, in its truest form, sometimes means walking away before it breaks something sacred. When the wind shifted, Michael looked back and gave a small nod, as if to say we're okay. Ethan nodded too. The distance between them felt right this time, not empty but respectful, filled with understanding instead of longing. Inside, the clock ticked softly, marking another ordinary day. The past still lived there, quiet and unspoken, but it no longer ruled the space between them. Ethan poured the last of the coffee into his mug, opened the window to let in the breeze and let the house breathe again.